stretching between the Yongding Gate in the south of the city and the Drum Tower and Bell Tower in the north. The 7.8-kilometer-long Beijing Central Axis, also known as the Chinese capital's backbone, is of global fame. From the surrounding areas of the Forbidden City to the nearby communities, many time-honored brands whose food are intangible cultural heritage are located along this axis. Let's get on a gourmet tour of the Central Axis. When it comes to Beijing cuisine, roast duck is one signature food. Huangjud roast duck, as one of the time-honored brands on the bustling Tiananmen Street, was introduced to the public from the Forbidden City during the Qing Dynasty, 1644 to 1911. Thanks to the persistent practices of generations of roast duck masters, the century-old hanging-style duck roasting techniques have passed on to the present. It includes 4 major steps of initial treatment: preserving, roasting, and slicing, and more than 30 links. Only going through such a sophisticated process can the best greasy feel be created in the roast duck. After enjoying the famous roast duck, let's try xiaomei, a traditional steamed pastry in Beijing. This is the signboard given by China's Qing Dynasty Emperor Qianlong, 1736 to 1795, and it's called Du Yichu. Du Yichi's xiaomei production skills have been listed as a national intangible cultural heritage. Every xiaomei has 24 wrinkles on it, a compulsory set pattern, symbolizing the 24 solar terms in Chinese culture. The shaped xiaomei has fresh fillings out at the seal, resembling a bud ready to bloom, which is quite an awe-inspiring technique. Food aside, let's talk about drinks. Chinese tea has a long history as a world intangible cultural heritage. Laoshi Tea House is named after Laoshi, a great Chinese cultural master. It has developed from a street stall offering big bowls of tea, each costing only 0.02 yuan, to a traditional Beijing compound tea house, offering tea banquet once exclusive in the Imperial Palace, and then to a Beijing-style cultural center integrating Peking opera, other opera, puppet show, and other cultural performances. With the advancement of the times, the intangible cultural heritage food along the Central Axis is also innovating while preserving their traditions. The roast duck has made its way into pastry, which presents the traditional eating method of roast duck by cakes, creating an impressive afternoon tea time featuring Central Axis delicacies. Traditional xiaomei extends from a single-color delicacy to one with various forms, such as showcasing the features of 4 seasons and the 5 colors of the Olympic rings, making an ordinary food stand out. The Central Axis, covering the Forbidden City and the public communities and lasting till today, is brimming with growing vitality. A series of intangible cultural heritage delicacies offers not only a taste of the past, but also a flavor of development. Whether it's a cultural continuation remaining unchanged in the past and the present, or it's a cultural enrichment to the traditions by using modern means, what keeps these intangible cultural heritage delicacies enduring is their cultural value. It is summertime again. The sweltering heat has seized the entire Beijing city. Along either side of the north-south central axis of Beijing, there is architecture epitomizing the imperial culture, and also street markets emblematic of traditional urban culture. Today, the street markets are interspersed with stalls for ice snacks, bought for our ancestors centuries ago who lived without air conditioning or refrigerators. If they desired cold drink in to beat the summer heat, what would they do? The fact is that there were indeed mysterious structures for storing ice in ancient times. In the Qing Dynasty, Beijing had a total of 18 official ice houses. Among them, 5 were inside the Forbidden City and were dedicated for imperial use. The other 13 were for high officials and nobles. The ice houses inside the Forbidden City are semi-basement elongated cave structures with arch roofs, aligned along a north-south axis. Sealed with walls around 2 meters thick, they have no windows and only doors on the north and south sides. The ice houses also featured black tech. Our ancestors used volcanic rocks as interior ground pavement, serving both insulation and sterilizing purposes. Now we have the storing places, but where did the ice come from? The ice cubes used in the Forbidden City to freeze food or to cool off the summer heat were mined from the moat around the Imperial Palace, the Beihai and Zhongnanhai lakes, the Imperial River, and elsewhere. The ice cubes for consumption were collected from frozen purified water in the reservoirs dug next to the above lakes and rivers. The ice mining would start right after winter solstice, the coldest days in a year. The workers were sent to quarry those clean, solid, and thick ice blocks and cut them into cubes of 0.5 meters, each weighing around 80 kilograms. Ice cubes of this size are the least likely to melt. Each ice house could store about 5,000 of these cubes. Because the difficulty in production, ice in the Forbidden City was only supplied from the 5th to the 7th month in the lunar calendar every year during the Qing dynasty. Even the emperor had to abide by this ration. The ice would be put into cloisonné buckets into the living rooms in the palace, releasing cold air to serve as primitive air conditioning. Wooden or bronze containers called bingjian were also used for freezing food or drink with ice, providing refreshments in the searing heat of summer. These are regarded as the earliest refrigerators of the world. Iced fruits, mung bean soup, sour plum drink, almond tofu. Among all the traditional summer snacks, the most special is sushan, or dairy hill, which was Qing Dynasty's ice cream. To make sushan, ice was put at the bottom of the base, and then flavored and shaped into tiny hills with toppings of melt cheese and butter. It was like a prototype of today's shaved ice dessert. At present, there are 3 well-preserved famous ice houses west to the Central Axis of Beijing. The ones in the Forbidden City have been turned into a special restaurant within the Palace Museum. It sells Ridge Beast ice creams and other special creative cold snacks. The ice houses are no longer exclusive to the imperial family, but rather where visitors can appreciate the profundity of history and culture while taking a rest. Likewise, Beijing Central Axis is no longer the pivot for the imperial residents, but for the life of common people. Many old Beijingers call the Central Axis the Central Axis Road. The route running through the north and south of China's capital, Beijing, indeed shoulders important transportation functions, and also boasts many firsts in the history of public transportation in Beijing. In 1957, Route Number 1, Beijing's first trolleybus service, kicked off full operation. Using China's first-generation domestic trolleybuses, known as Type Beijing 1. The biggest impression the trolleybus had left on the passengers was its 2 long wires resembling big braids. They were attached to the power grid in the air to supply power to vehicles, and might occasionally encounter derailment, leading to the forced shutdown of vehicles. The Type 1 Beijing 1 trolleybus had served Beijing citizens for more than 30 years, carrying the traffic memory of people of that era. Nowadays, the trolleybus has made a nostalgic comeback in the form of cultural and creative building blocks, enabling the older generation to recall the past and the younger generation to learn more about history. In this way, the time-honored trolleybus culture lives on. The earliest bus line along the Central Axis is bus number 5, whose history can be traced back to 1935. It used T-110 Dodge passenger vehicle, whose engine front looks like a big nose, thus gaining the nickname Big Nose Bus. Now the bus number 5 is a photon hybrid bus, fueled by the particularly popular extended range form of power supply. The original route of bus number 5 was from Donghuamen to Xiangshan. After several adjustments, it has been extended to shuttle between Saihuying Bridge to Beitucheng. Running upwards along the north section of the Central Axis, one can see the Olympic Park. All the way south, the bus shuttles through the red walls and green tiles of the old city, passing through Jingshan Park, Tiananmen Square, the Forbidden City, Tiananmen, Yongding Gate, and other well-known scenic spots on the Central Axis. The route of bus number 5 almost completely coincides with the Central Axis. Thus, it's fair to call the ride the most scenic bus route along the Central Axis. Beijing's first BRT line also ran along the Central Axis. On December 25, 2004, the South Central Axis BRT Route 1 was completed and put into trial operation. BRT, known as a subway on the ground, greatly eases the traffic pressure in crowded areas, meeting the tourist demands for fast and convenient transportation. At the same time, BRT Line 1 has also become a window for promoting the Central Axis. Various promotional messages of the Central Axis are displayed in the carriage, bringing the cultural heritage closer to the daily life of ordinary people. From trolley buses to buses and BRT, the public transportation vehicles running along the Central Axis are constantly changing, carrying the memories of generations and witnessing the ever-changing transformation and development of the cultural heritage, Beijing and China.
It just took 15 years from 2008 to 2022 for Beijing to become the world's first city to host both the Summer and Winter Olympics, creating world-famous sports and cultural landscapes such as the Bird's Nest and Water Cube, Ice Cube, which are located on the extension line of Beijing Central Axis. In fact, many sports in ancient China were carried out around the Central Axis, whose traces could still be spotted in many modern sports today. Ice frolicking is a general term for many ice activities. Those who were good at skating were selected to train and perform in Chaya Pool in the Forbidden City, presenting impressive performances like figure skating and acrobatics on ice. The Frolic on the Ice, a painting collected by the Palace Museum, depicts the grand scenes of ice frolicking in the imperial court during the period under Emperor Qianlong's reign, 1736 to 1796. Running for rank was also an ice frolicking activity, which was similar to speed skating in Winter Olympics. Nowadays, football is popular all over the world. In 2004, FIFA recognized that China is the birthplace of football. Football was called Zhuji in ancient China. The Chinese character Chu means kicking, and Hui refers to leather ball. In the Qing dynasty, Zhuji was one of the festive activities of the court, and it was also very popular outside the court. Zhuji was later introduced to Europe and gradually became modern football after a long period of development and improvement. If Zhuji was a foot sport, then Jizhui was a sport entailing the combined skills of hands and feet. When hitting the ball on a horse, the player should not only control the horse, but also swing a bat to hit the ball, demanding quite sophisticated personal skills. Compared with Tuzhi and Jizhui, Chuiyuan was a softer sport. It was very similar to modern golf. Players would hold bats and hit the ball in turn. Colorful flags would be inserted at the socket as signs, and a score could be gained if the ball was hit into the socket. In the Yuan dynasty, 600 years before the first modern Olympic Games, a long-distance race called Fangzhou was held once a year. Like today's popular city marathon in the world, Fangzhou was also held in two capital cities of the Yuan dynasty at that time, and its length was almost equivalent to 2 marathons. Along with the changes of time, The rules and names of sports events are ever different, but people's love for sports have remained the same. By the end of 2021, the number of outdoor sports participants in China exceeded 400 million, with the constant emergence of different kinds of outdoor sports. By the end of 2022, China was home to 127,800 fitness trails and 2,452 ice and snow sports venues. The new stadiums have extended the confinement of the Central Axis, and various sports events have developed from entertainment of a few people to shared fun by the general public.